Hello and welcome to this week's Strange Pathways. I am your host, Scott Mort. I hope you've had a great week. I'm scared. I've been having a bit of a rough one. My good friend Walter is currently into the intensive care unit. He's fighting some after effects of COVID, and it is looking very dire. I love this man. I love him with all my heart. He's like a brother to me. And just keeping in contact with his girlfriend, his mother, it's frightening. It is frightening. The one thing I do whenever I'm scared, whenever I'm kind of in a situation where I don't have a lot of control, the one thing I tend to do is clean. And right now, the house is pretty spotless. So if you could take just a few moments out of your day and send Walter some good vibes, I would appreciate it. I'm sure he would appreciate it too. Our first story is a little bit of a request. This came to us via Shannon Zabatos fan 46 on YouTube in the comments section. It's not very often someone can hit me with something I haven't heard of before. So whenever somebody can hit me with 3 things right in a row that I've never heard of before, that kind of grabs my attention. He asked if I ever heard of the Bremerton Monstrosity, and then 2 other things, and I'm eventually going to get to those as well. I had never heard of the Bremerton Monstrosity, so of course I looked it up and was just instantly fascinated. And now I'd love to share the story with you. So we're going to go back all the way to 1948. The city of Bremerton in Washington State. This is a peninsula. It's surrounded on 3 sides by water, and Bremerton is actually the largest city on this peninsula, called the Kitsap Peninsula, and it's appropriately home of the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. During World War II, we're talking like 80,000 residents. And most of the work there was like shipbuilding, repair, maintenance, and this was all because of the Pacific War, a war that my father fought in, a war that my father was on a sinking ship in. If you go look, there are photos of a sinking ship called the Mariposa that sunk in the Pacific during World War II. Somewhere in that photo of men floating in the water, there's my dad. You can't really see anything. Now, unfortunately, the population wouldn't last. By 1950, there was only 27,000 and a half citizens left. 1948, though, which is the year that the story takes place, 1948, it's still pretty bustling. There's this young lady who lives in Bremerton, Virginia Staples. Not a very tall woman, only about 5 foot. Now, Virginia is doing laundry, and she's bringing it down to the basement of her apartment building where the machines were located. The apartment where she's living has a massive basement. The apartment houses were so close together, they all had basements. They were old buildings. And there were huge holes in these walls, and the apartment manager kind of came to her and went, you know what, if you go through this hole and into the next basement, eventually you can find like 2 other holes in this other massive basement, and then you could probably get out to the sea. You could probably get out to the saltwater passages. These saltwater passages, these channels, they ran between the buildings. They ran beneath them. And they would bring in a lot of moisture. Now, there's this washer. There's a wash tub, an entire clothesline. And Virginia has all of her clothes hung up. But she has this weird feeling that someone is staring at her, looking at her. She turns around. She looked towards the back of the basement. She's kind of peering through these holes that connected her cellar to the basement of the building next door. And there stands this thing. It's as tall as she is. Remember, Virginia's about 5 foot tall. This thing has a bright orange body and these spidery thin legs and antenna on top of its head that keep moving back and forth, and they kind of pop in and come back out. And it starts running towards her. Virginia does not take her eyes off of it. She backs out of the basement. She gets up to her apartment. She packs all of her things and moves. She decides she's going to move in with her cousins. Moves over to Seattle. Her curiosity, though, it gets the better of her. Maybe this is something that's ordinary. Maybe this is just something that she doesn't realize. So she goes to an aquarium. She wants to see if she can find anything that kind of looks like what it is. The only thing she can find was a tiny little shrimp. It didn't make any sense to her. It bugs her for years and years and years. Nightmares. Near constant nightmares. And who can blame her? Who can blame her? Finally, enough time has passed. She's kind of getting her courage back. She wants to go back to revisit Bremerton. The Navy, though, had enlarged so much. The apartment that was on Denny Street, where she used to live, was torn down. Now, once you start looking into this story, though, there are some inconsistencies. There was a Denny Street. It's a small side road that was in East Bremerton. It doesn't seem that it would be close enough to the water to make it likely that there would be a tunnel that would run from the water to the basement. The Navy didn't really have a presence in the area where Denny Street was. But let's really, really dig into this. I lived in Minneapolis back in 1996 and 97. I can't tell you what the name of the street I lived on is. I know that the street that I went to school on was either Washington Street or Washington Avenue whenever I lived in Minneapolis, because my home street growing up was Washington Avenue. But even where I grew up, I can't remember what the number of my house was. I can't remember what the number of Washington Avenue was where I grew up. Also, here in Johnstown where I live, there's a Maple Street and a Maple Avenue and a Maple Lane. It doesn't seem like Virginia lived in Bremerton very long. So, Virginia was interviewed for this story in the 90s. This story originally appeared in the magazine Strange. This was the 90s. From the late 40s, 48, to the 1990s. I can't remember the name of the street I lived on whenever I was in college. There could be other explanations as to why there are certain inconsistencies. Or maybe I just like to think that there are giant shrimp living in the ocean. It is a vastly unexplored region of our planet. And we are constantly finding new and strange things living in our oceans. It's been said that the oceans remain less explored than our own moon. So why couldn't there be massive shrimp living in the ocean? The part of me that loves scary stuff wants it to be true. And the part of me that loves going to the beach wants it to be a lie. Let's talk about Dr. Gary Nolan. Dr. Nolan is a Stanford microbiologist. He spent the last 10 years working with a group of amazing individuals looking into the UFO phenomena. Now, who is Dr. Nolan? He's the person that proved that the 6-inch Atacama skeleton, called Atta, he proved that wasn't an alien, but a premature human. He's published 300 research articles, holds 40 patents, is honored as one of the top 25 inventors at Stanford University. This is a man who's built up a resume. So is it any surprise he would be approached by the CIA and some aeronautics corporations to investigate UFO encounters? They're asking for his help. In specific, they want Dr. Nolan to analyze the blood of UFO witnesses. These people, they have the best blood analysis equipment on Earth. Dr. Nolan's working with the samples, and then he pulls out an MRI of some of the people who have seen these UFOs. Pilots, ground personnel, intelligence agents. Their brains are damaged. In his words, horribly, horribly damaged. He said you didn't even have to be a doctor to see that there was a problem. These victims of these UFO encounters, they would hear buzzing noises in their head, they would get sick. And it seems like a lot of the people received damage in the middle of the basal ganglia. That's an area in the brain responsible for motor control and core brain functions. It also affects your intuition. In some cases, Dr. Nolan said that there was so much brain damage, these people should be dead. Unfortunately, Dr. Nolan is quite right. About 25% of the victims have died from their UFO exposure. One of his patients had an encounter on Skinwalker Ranch, and his brain was damaged extensively. Maybe this is a weapon. Maybe this is some sort of side effect of some massive radiation or massive electrical field that these crafts use. It's terrifying to think that you could be minding your own business, just driving down the road. You see a bright light out in the sky. You pull over, you step out of your car, trying to get a better view of it. And the part of you that is you, the integral part of you, your brain, the very seat of the human soul, irreparably, massively damaged, just because you happen to look upon something you shouldn't look at. You didn't ask for it. It's all frighteningly biblical. And maybe therein lies the clue. I'm in the middle of the Jacques Vallée book, Passport to Magonia. And whenever I say these things seem biblical, it's Passport to Magonia is eye-opening. Because maybe these things that we see as aliens, that's just their latest disguise. 2,000 years ago, these things were demons. 1,500 years ago, these things were fairies. 500 years ago, these were elves. And now they're aliens. And we're already in the crux of saying, well, these might not be aliens. Maybe these are time travelers from the future. Maybe they're interdimensional creatures coming from an alternate reality. We're at an interesting spot in history where this disguise, whatever this phenomena is pulling down one mask and slipping another on top. Here's something to think about. If I'm outside and I see a bright light and a person floating up into the sky, that's a UFO. But if I'm inside my house and there's a bright light in the corner of my room and my friend starts to float off the ground, well, that's a ghost. That's a demonic possession. But really, the only thing that has changed is our location. Just something to think about. I've got 3 really good friends who live in Sweden. Gustav, Linda, and Håkon. And I've been searching for something worthy of the show to just kind of give it that Swedish flavor. And I think I found something. Our last tale is going to take us all the way back to 1955. Sweden, of course. Now this was dug up by UFO researcher Ed Komarak. This story was translated by another researcher named John Fontaine, who met a witness during a UFO conference in Sweden. The man had been working as a lumberjack with 2 of his brothers in the town of Västra Norrland. I'm probably not saying that right. Västra Norrland is on the shores of the Gulf of Bothnia of the Baltic Sea. And this is a July morning at 6 a.m. The men are all busy cutting trees, but they hear something big just smashing through the forest. It's breaking branches. It's scraping trees. And then they see it. It's this cigar-shaped object. It's about the size of a private jet. And it's flying not above the trees, it's flying through the trees. Now they look at it and go, oh man, this is an airplane, and it's just the momentum carrying it. Its wings have been ripped off. So they start running after it. They're running towards the river, and they're just trying to keep up with it. But they just need to follow the damage, really. They get to a 30-foot clearing, and then this bright flash illuminates everything around them. But it's not an explosion. This is completely silent. And they said it behaved weirdly. They said they could see right through the trees. It was like they were living in an X-ray. But then the center of the light began to suck everything that was on the ground towards it. This lasted for about a second. They look around. One of the brothers says, "Hey, come over here. There's a dwarf in a uniform." They all run over and they're seeing this man. He's about 4 feet tall. But they instantly know something is off. It's not just this is a short man. This is not just a little person. This man has a white halo around his entire body. One of the brothers touches him. Now keep in mind the brain damage case we had earlier. The creature, let's call it that, because it's obviously not human at this point. It's not a man. It's a creature. This creature wakes up and begins shouting at the men in Swedish, "Do not touch me. It will only bring you difficulties." The brothers are astounded. It's perfect Swedish. Now, they said this alien, it had a good symmetrical physique, broad shoulders, normal features. His skin was slightly yellowish. They said it was like an Asian, and his eyes were completely black. There's some scratches, bruises on his face. There's a large wound on his forehead, another one on his chin. The top of his head, it's downy. It's not bald, but it's downy. The hair's kind of white. The earlobes were attached to the neck. They kind of looked like a shark's fin. They said his lips were wrinkled, narrow, same color as his skin. They said on the occasions that this creature smiled, which he did a lot, you could see a row of small teeth in the mouth. The alien looks at them and goes, "Internally, I'm destroyed." This thing knew that it was dying. He takes out this rectangular object with a pencil attached to it. He writes something on it, and then he throws it into the bushes. Told the lumberjacks, "Don't touch it." In the creature's own words, "Don't touch it. It will tell my fellow men what has happened so they don't come looking for me." These brothers, knowing that this thing is dying, they don't leave it. They have a 2-hour conversation. The alien's in great pain. He tells them that he's flown from the constellation Aquila, and the Earth has been regularly visited by a vast array of alien races for centuries. We're now getting down to just the last few minutes of this alien's life. The alien looks at the brothers and says, "I want you to put my remains in this bag." He pulled this bag out of nowhere, like an invisible pocket, and then says, "When I am dead, the light will disappear from my body, and with the help of the other 2 men, you shall put me in this bag and carry me out to the river where I shall disappear. Then you shall rinse yourself thoroughly in the water so that you don't get ill." He looks at them, smiles, says some words in a language they don't understand, and then back to Swedish, and says, "You have come without any wish to, and depart against your own wish. Our life is like vapor." A few more words that they couldn't understand. They thought it was a prayer to whatever gods he worshipped, and he died. And true to their word, the brothers do exactly what he asked. They put his dead body into the bag, carry him out to the river. The bag smelled like sulfur. They said that it burned their hands as they carried it. They threw the bag into the river. They washed themselves. After this story is told to Fontaine, the witness says, well, I have a little bit of proof. And then he shows him this piece of metal. He found it a couple of days later, where the creature threw the tablet, the note that he left for his people. But the tablet was gone. The pencil, though, was still laying in the grass. The witness never gave it up, never handed it over for research, never contacted journalists, ufologists, nothing. Why he decided to tell Fontaine, who knows? Maybe he just liked Fontaine. Thank you once again for joining us here this week on Strange Pathways. Head on over to our Facebook page. We're going to have a lot of photos dealing with the tales we had today. If you're so inclined, come on over to YouTube, click that like button, hit subscribe, do the notifications. Be sure to comment. If you'd like to get in touch with us, strangepathwaysmail@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Be sure to throw out some good vibes for my friend Walter. Take care of yourselves and each other.